And welcome to At Issue. My name is H. Wayne Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us for a discussion about Peoria's riverfront. A lot of changes along the riverfront over time. Many of you remember Eckwood Park, which was essentially a parking lot, and it has evolved to include the Gateway building and things of that nature. But there's more in store, and to have a conversation about what's in store, we've invited Sharon Graham to join us. Sharon is the director of the Peoria Riverfront Association. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And also with us is the assistant city manager for the city of Peoria, Chris Setti, who happens to focus on a lot of development along the riverfront for the city.
That's correct.
And before we get started, there might be a few people out there who are saying the Peoria Riverfront Association. What exactly is that?
Okay. We are an organization that's been around for 20 years now. We are made up of businesses, event planning organizations, nonprofits, as well as residents that are on the riverfront and other downtown residential units. And we work to promote the riverfront, promote the businesses. We work together to help advocate and communicate with the businesses as well as the residents that live down there, and then also promote the area to visitors. So we have our website is visitdowntownpeoria.com. It's got a huge calendar of events, of things going on, and all of the restaurants, the things to do, places to go. So we try to promote all of that as a group.
We'll talk about those events and things to do, but first let's talk about a couple of structures, or lack of structure. One would be the Caterpillar facility. Caterpillar owns 6 blocks in downtown Peoria. They were going to build a world headquarters there. That is obviously not going to occur now. The headquarters building and the parking deck will remain, but what is to become of the bank building, the professional building, the parking deck? Those are all empty. What happens to those blocks they aren't using?
Sure, and we're really talking about 2 blocks. They own 6 blocks, but 4 of them are being used. The Caterpillar Visitor Center is on one of them. They have a surface parking lot that's on another, and then they're, as you said, their building and their parking deck. So what we're really talking about is the 2 blocks there between Main and Liberty. And between Washington and Adams Street. You know, we have had really good relationship with Caterpillar throughout this whole process. They're trying to decide what's the best way forward with those properties. You know, I think that obviously the city and citizens of Peoria and Caterpillar, quite frankly, they don't want to see those buildings just sit there empty for the next decade. We don't want a situation where we have like the Sears block, which for a decade sat as just basically a hole in the ground. So I think we're working together to figure out what the future of that property is, and how is it that we encourage some development or some reuse of that block in a way that is good for downtown, obviously good for Caterpillar and good for everyone else.
Do you have any way of knowing whether the buildings remain or will they be torn down? The parking deck is not in good condition.
I think that I think everything, all of those options are on the table. If we could find a user for, especially for the Block and Cool building, or it depends on what you want to call it, the bank building that's there. I think if we could find someone who is interested in reusing that building, it's a really neat building and it has some architectural value to it, but it's a very large building. It's over 100,000 square feet, and that can be very difficult to find tenants for to fill that space. So, but I do think that all options are on the table as we kind of look towards the future, and hoping to come to some sort of resolution as to the way forward on that particular set of properties.
One of the things I want to bring up is the fact that in the warehouse district, renovation became very expensive. I want to talk about the warehouse district, but how difficult is it to renovate, say, that bank building, which was built about 1900?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I'm not an architect, nor am I a builder. So and building something new also costs money. So it's really about a balance between what's how much something will cost and how much income you can derive from it in order to pay whatever debt you have. I unlike some of the warehouse district buildings, I will say that the bank building has some advantages in that it was office space before, so it has heating and air conditioning, for example, on all of the floors. It is likely sprinklered on all of the floors. Some of the costs that are associated in, say, the renovation of a warehouse is that those buildings didn't have any of those things. This one has working elevators. It has, handicap accessibility already taken care of. So some of the sometimes what would be described as a disadvantage of the renovation of an older building aren't as present in this building, just because it was, up until about 2 or 3 years ago, occupied by businesses. So it doesn't have some of the same challenges as let's say 800 Southwest Washington would, which is got no AC and no heat and no plumbing above the first floor.
Another structure that will come down is, and we call it the Riverfront Village, we call
Right.
it the platform, we call it the pad,
Right.
various names. That will be torn down. What's the timetable and what's the schedule for the replacement, the park area?
Sure. So last August, the City Council agreed to work with the business community on purchasing the rights to Riverfront Village. While the city has owned the platform itself and the parking below it and the land below it, all of the buildings on top of it were privately owned by a developer, and also rights to develop additional buildings. So all of that was negotiated with the help of the Downtown Development Corporation, and the City Council agreed to what's called the cooperation agreement. And that dictates that the city will tear the structure down and replace it with open space. At the moment, the schedule is we originally were going to try to tear this down in April. But in talking with the Peoria Riverfront Association and some other folks about the logistics of doing that, we decided to wait until after Labor Day. It'll take about 3 months from beginning to end to get the structure down. That's all of the mobilization and the work that needs. It's not that day one that the wrecking ball comes. It's you have to disconnect electrical and do all sorts of other things. But it takes about 3 months from beginning to end. And we need to get that in before, obviously, the weather turns bad. So we're going to start in April and try to finish before July 4th, which is a big time in downtown. Or we would wait until after Labor Day and try to get it in before Thanksgiving. And so we chose the latter. It allows there to be no disruption to some of the summertime festivals, and with just some minor adjustments in the months of September and October.
So this was a relief to you, Sharon.
Yes. I manage the Riverfront Market on Saturday mornings, and that specific area is where we hold the market. And the market's been bringing an average of 4,000 people to the riverfront every Saturday morning, as well as some of the other big concerts and festivals. That just leaves that area open for parking this summer, and also allows us to keep the market in its location through we go through September, but we will be able to move it a lot easier in September than in the big months of July and August.
You mentioned that word parking.
Yes.
And there has been discussion already about the fact that, and we don't know what the final plan is, but there could be a loss of some parking right there along the river. How important is parking to the riverfront?
Parking is very important to our businesses, and as I mentioned earlier, we try to advocate for the businesses along the riverfront. Martinis and Blue Duck are right there and use a lot of parking, as well as the Spirit of Peoria. They have a lot of senior citizens that take their cruises, so maintaining, while we understand that green space is important, we just like to maintain a little bit more parking in that area for the surrounding businesses. The Spirit of Peoria has been around almost 25 years, and we certainly would like to help accommodate their business, as well as work with the city on the park and have a nice green area to hold events.
So what is the plan once the structure comes down?
Sure. So by middle of November, the structure should be down, and what concrete is left will be broken up, and hopefully I don't know if it'd get planted, with sod by then, but ready for the next spring. And but the idea is to build kind of somewhere between a passive park and an active park. It's a park an open space with some elements to it. We have a couple of different ideas that are out there. We're still kind of designing and gathering input on some of the ideas. We lose about 140 parking spaces currently that are there. The plan that we've already shown actually restores about 30 of those parking spaces. And we're looking at some of the other options that we may have. Parking is an interesting, it's an interesting animal, right? Because it works as a system, and people always want to park absolutely as close as they can. I don't know if it's a Midwestern thing or if it's an American thing, but
It's a rural thing, because
Well-
people come in from out of town, they want to park in front
Sure,
of the
and-
store, in front of the event.
right, and we certainly want to accommodate those folks. We want as many people as possible to come to our downtown because we have a lot to offer between the museums, these festivals, the riverfront market, great retail like Running Central. But so we're studying the parking right now as to how people currently use it, and not just what gets used, but what gets left unused, because there's lots of parking. There is a lot of parking along the riverfront on the other side of Water Street, between Hamilton and Eaton. There's a little parking lot next to the Gateway building. We want to understand how all of these parking spaces work together, because people will walk a little bit more for the right thing, and that's really what we've seen. I mean, Sharon has run an incredible, and the Peoria Riverfront Association has run an incredible riverfront market on Saturday mornings. People will park all the way underneath the Bob Michael Bridge and walk because there's something worth walking to, and that's really what we're talking about when we talk about this open space concept. Is that we want to draw more people to downtown. We want people who go to the Riverfront Museum to walk across the street and enjoy this park. Maybe go to Blue Duck for lunch or go to Martini's for a drink afterwards. And so what we're really trying to do is create a destination that people are willing to walk to.
But for those, and Sharon mentioned those with limited mobility, and that happens to be a good portion of those that go on the riverboat. Have you talked to Alex Greaves at the Spirit of Peoria about his concerns for parking?
Yes, we've talked to Alex. One of the things we're doing is counting right now. We have public works interns who have been out there looking at various times of the days and various times of the week. Alex was kind enough to give us his entire schedule for the year, so we know when he's got scheduled trips, so we can understand how those people park and how many handicapped placards we're seeing, and where in the plan could we accommodate that, because not everybody who goes on the Spirit of Peoria is immobile or mobility challenged, and so it really is about understanding how the current parking is used.
So is there still an opportunity for public input as to the design of that park?
Definitely. We actually have a website, planpeoria.com, that you can go on and look at some of the concepts that we've been looking at. We've worked with the Peoria Riverfront Association and other stakeholders to kind of understand, what we really want, is for this plan to fit within the overall network of opportunities and that are on the riverfront, really from bridge to bridge, from the Bob Michael Bridge to I-74, is that this is Peoria's front door, and we want everything to be able to work together. That includes parking.
What is necessary in that redevelopment, the development of the park, to assist your businesses, your supporters?
Well, and I agree with Chris that people are willing to walk for certain events. Some of the bigger concerts that are coming down to the riverfront, obviously people have to walk several blocks to get to those, and they are willing to walk those blocks to the riverfront market. But I think we need to look at Martini's and Blue Duck and Spirit of Peoria and Rhythm Kitchen and protect some parking for them for their regular daily business, for their lunch business and their dinner business. And so that when the concerts are going on, there's a place for people who just want to come down and go to dinner to park as well.
We've been talking a lot about structures. I want to talk about events for just a moment, because it seems, and this is just a casual observation, it seems like there's a lot more happening on the riverfront than in past years.
Definitely.
Why?
Well, I think a big part of that is the Peoria Park District's effort to bring in some bigger acts this summer to Festival Park and the CEFCU Center stage, and they're working closely with Limelight Eventplex, and they're bringing in some big names like, we had the Jake Owen concert last weekend. Trace Atkins is coming, the Goo Goo Dolls, Casey and the Sunshine Band. Some of these bigger names are coming, which will hopefully sell a lot more tickets. I think they're expecting between 6,000 and 8,000 people to each of these concerts. The Tailgate and Tall Boys concert that Trace Atkins is a part of, they have several dates throughout the summer that they will have country names come in and perform.
And along the parking theme, the biggest event, of course, is the July 4th Festival on
Yes.
the riverfront. talk about parking needs.
Yes. Well, and I think everybody will be parking away from the riverfront and walking to the riverfront for the actual 4th of July event because they're actually closing off Water Street to allow pedestrian traffic on Water Street.
So what does, because you're supported by businesses primarily, what does it mean to have these concerts that bring 6,000 people, to have the July 4th festival and have more of them, as well as the traditional Irish, German, the Blues and Heritage Festival, etc.?
Well, sometimes, like the big events like the 4th of July, sometimes those are so big it's a little overwhelming for some of the businesses. I know Martini's has a special event. The museum has an outdoor event that they sell tickets for, which is just huge. It's very popular. So those types of businesses do well and make an event around the 4th of July. Some of the smaller businesses may close that day because there's so much traffic down on the riverfront and they're there to see the fireworks and not necessarily go to the Hive.
But when we have a concert with 6,000 people,
Yes. Well, hopefully they will go to dinner beforehand, go to Martini's afterwards for a drink afterwards, stop at Emac and Bolio's for some ice cream between dinner and the concert. You know, that's really our hope, is that the people that are coming down for these concerts will take advantage of the businesses that surround the area.
And if I could add to something, a lot of times these concerts or these festivals, whether that's a music festival or a concert or a cultural festival, they introduce people to downtown. And so it may not even be that particular day that somebody goes and tries the Blue Duck, but they might see it while they're down there for a Trace Adkins concert, and then they come back. And so it's really about providing a variety of programming, a variety of opportunities in our downtown and our riverfront, and hoping that people will come back and do more than one thing.
And that's what we really hope to do with the riverfront market. You know, there is a lot of food available at the market, but we don't allow sandwiches and that type of thing because we like to reserve that for the Blue Duck. You know, they open for brunch on Saturday mornings, and their tables outside are always filled during the market. Rhythm Kitchen benefits from the market as well. So that's what we'd like, more events like that, like you said, they'll come down and they'll see something and they'll experience it and they'll come back.
let's go back to the issue of structures. What is the status of, and I assume it's going to remain a Four Points hotel in downtown Peoria?
You know, they continue working on the renovation of that structure. I think their opening has been pushed back a little bit towards the beginning of 2018, as I understand it. You know, that those structures are complicated structures, and when you have a hotel that's over 300 rooms, there's a lot of things that need to be considered from a plumbing and electricity and HVAC standpoint. And so they are working with all due speed, but you know, sometimes you don't know what you've got until you kind of open up. And so I will say they're making tremendous progress, and they have completely transformed that corner of Madison and Hamilton into a really beautiful entrance into that hotel. And I think that says something about the quality of a company when they're willing to invest that sort of money in aesthetics, because I think that they're really trying to transform that part of our downtown.
And the reference to the company is Hawkeye Hotels,
Right.
Which bought the Four Points. Now, at the time that we taped this program, the City Council had not made a decision on River Trail Apartments, which is north of the Riverplex in Riverfront Park. Real briefly, if the council approves it, what does that mean? And when I say approves it, that means approves the extension of
Right.
the current contract.
Right. Yeah. So what's called the due diligence window, which is a 6-month period in which both the city and the developer had to produce certain deliverables, expires June 30th. So council is going to be asked to extend that window for another 6 months. On the city side, it's really about receiving approval from the National Park Service on what's called the conversion of that property, because it was federally funded open space at one point, just like the Riverplex was. We have to go through a process of converting to an option that we have identified along the riverfront, right next door actually to Riverfront Park. And so that still has not come in as of the taping of this show. And so council is going to be asked to extend the due diligence window to keep the hope of this project alive.
And if they say no?
Well, if the city council does not vote to extend the due diligence window, then we'd be back to the drawing board. Essentially, the project would be over as we know it. I guess it wouldn't stop us from reintroducing the redevelopment agreement, at some point. But that's why we're asking them for an extension of the window.
You'll know the answer to that by the time this program airs. I want to back up and maybe I should have started with the overview, but what kind of evolution has occurred along the riverfront from your perspective?
Well, I've been in this position for 12 years now, and the riverfront, I mean, when I started, the museum wasn't built yet, so we went through the whole process of getting that approved and being built, the Caterpillar Visitor Center. I mean, it's a different place than it was even 12 years ago. Running Central is down there, and they bring a steady stream of people to come and shop, which is great to see retail being successful down on the riverfront. The new restaurants, the Blue Duck, Time, Sugar, that's getting into the warehouse district. But
we'll talk about the warehouse district in a minute, so go ahead.
But it's just really nice to see the businesses succeed, and there's a lot of things to do. And I think sometimes that people that live in Peoria are the hardest on our downtown and our riverfront, because I've had people come from out of town all the time tell me how great our riverfront is and how great our downtown is and how many things there are to do. So I love to hear that.
And it's a big difference from long ago when Eckwood Park was
Yes.
the riverfront for the city of Peoria. The warehouse district, Tris, it's just been in the last couple of years that what you had hoped would happen actually is happening. And that has to be part of the riverfront.
Oh, definitely.
So were there critical steps along the way that said, oh, now this is really going to work?
It has been a long process, really almost 10 years since my predecessor, Greg Hullinger, kind of started working on the idea of the warehouse district as a mixed-use residential neighborhood for downtown. And the economy got in the way for a long time. We launched the warehouse district redevelopment initiative in late 2007, and in 2008, that's when the bubble burst. And for really the next 3 or 4 years, we didn't see a lot of anything happening. I think really two things helped to really get the momentum going in the warehouse district. One was the street improvements that we did with the help of a state capital grant and then a federal, what's called a Tiger grant. Combined, those two were about $23 million that we were able to use to completely recharacterize the streets in the warehouse district, really from Kampf to Persimmon. It was a powerful statement to the development community that we were willing as a city to put our money where our mouth was, and really set the frame for the private developers to kind of fill in. I think the second thing all of that work was done in 2012, 2013. I think the second thing that happened was the creation of the state historic tax credit, which almost every other state in the union has, and every state around the state of Illinois has a state historic tax credit. That really helped because, as we kind of discussed earlier, it can be very expensive to renovate these structures, and it can be difficult to get bank financing. So the tax credit really provides an equity injection into these projects, and we've seen some really tremendous success really in just the last 2 years.
Sharon, Chris mentioned public dollars being put into the warehouse district, and we know that public dollars were put into the Gateway building. Mm-hmm. We know that public dollars were put into the Peoria Riverfront Museum. Mm-hmm. And you represent businesses mm-hmm. along in the downtown and even up onto the West Bluff on mm-hmm. Main Street. What are they telling you? What are those businesses telling you about the importance of public dollars?
Well, I think those public dollars provide the infrastructure, the streets down into the warehouse district, and I mean they provided the museum, which filled in that block, and it allows our businesses to succeed. I mean, it brings people down here, gets them comfortable coming to the downtown, and helps support the businesses. So I think everyone is thrilled with especially the street structure that went into the warehouse district. I mean, that was crucial to get those businesses down there.
And having people who live downtown is critical because
right.
We've seen examples in other communities where they build nice facilities, nice parks. Toledo was an example of one that failed because there wasn't a critical mass of residents. Right. Where are we with downtown residential units?
Well, between downtown and the warehouse district, and I always like to think of them as one place. It's only 8 blocks really from one end to the other. We have seen over 130 apartment units come online in the last 2 years. So Murray Building, the Winkler Lofts, the Persimmon Lofts, Cooperage 214, the Marquette Apartments. We've seen, between those, that's 130 units, give or take. That's important. We only had 350 some odd units in downtown before then.
And I think 3 of those buildings are 100%
Right.
full.
Yes.
They've filled almost immediately once they were completed.
Right, and Kurt Huber's just now opening the Marquette Building, and he has, I think, 10 of the 28 already filled,
Leased,
but
yeah.
he just opened like a couple of weeks ago. So that's actually pretty good. So we're seeing that demand for housing in downtown do quite well.
And the demand for time is such that we've run out of time. I'd like to say thank you to Sharon
you.
Graham, who is the director of the Peoria Riverfront Association. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And the assistant city manager for the city of Peoria is Chris Setti. Thank you as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on At Issue. Next time, we've been talking about the riverfront. Next week, we're going to talk about the river that's in front of the riverfront, the Illinois River and Peoria Lakes. What's next for those bodies of water on the next At Issue?